My name was Ahmad. I was a respected Quran teacher in the heart of Mecca, where silence often whispered what our hearts dared not express. I was the embodiment of faith, a guide in a society steadfast in its beliefs. Yet, beneath the surface of my piety lay a tormenting emptiness, a spiritual void that deepened each day. I was bound by tradition, woven into a fabric of obedience that silenced every question, threatening to unravel my reality. But all that changed in an instant when I came face to face with the truth. One fateful Friday, amidst the sacred echoes of the Khutbah, my world shattered. A dizzy spell sent me spiraling into darkness, and in that profound stillness, I encountered a radiant figure, Jesus. He called my name, shattering the chains of a religious construct that had held me captive for so long. In that moment I understood. The faith I had devoted my life to was not the ultimate truth. It was a diversion, a veil over the magnificent relationship waiting beyond. What I experienced in that desolate expanse was not merely a vision, but a divine revelation. I learned of a spiritual battle raging on, a conflict manipulating not just individuals, but entire communities. The architecture of my belief system stood exposed as a tool of control, driven by fear and conformity, a stark reality that many, even now, refuse to see. Upon returning to life, the echoes of Jesus' message reverberated in my heart, igniting a determination to seek a deeper truth. I was no longer the Ahmad who followed blindly. I was a man awakened, propelled by the urgency to free others trapped in the same suffocating darkness. Yet, with each step into this newfound light, I faced the wrath of a community unwilling to entertain any dissent, branding me a heretic for pursuing what I believed was the true path. So here I stand before you, willing to risk everything. I invite you to journey with me as I unravel my tale, a story that reveals more than my own struggle. It illuminates a universal quest for truth amid the shadows of deception. Before we dive deeper, please share where you're watching from and what time it is there. I want to know how far this message is reaching. And if you feel that stirring in your spirit, subscribe to Truth from Beyond. Let's embark on this transformative journey together, for what follows is not just a testimony, it's a call to awaken. In a deeply conservative neighborhood in Mecca, the air felt thick with an unwavering devotion to Islamic tradition. Streets lined with houses, each one a reflection of the past, carried the whispered remnants of history and reverence. The community was anchored in rigid obedience to religious authority, a world where questioning or expressing doubt was not just frowned upon. It was a surefire way to invite scorn and ostracism. Every Friday, the mosque was packed with worshippers, their faces reflecting a piety that masked an undercurrent of fear. It was an environment that demanded conformity and stifled any flicker of dissent. I grew up in this world, shaped by the strict adherence to traditions and beliefs that had been passed down through generations. As a young boy, I learned that faith was about obedience, about surrendering my will to a higher power without question. My heart was filled with respect and love for the teachings of Islam, yet an unsettling emptiness began to creep in as I grew older. Internally, I grappled with a growing dissonance between my desires and the rigid structure expected of me. The notion of a personal connection with God was eclipsed by the heavy demands of religious observance. Even as I took my place as an imam, a respected leader in our community, I couldn't shake the feeling of something missing. Silent doubts gnawed at me during my prayers, and I often found myself questioning the very doctrines I was responsible for teaching. It was during one of those moments amid the whispers of doubt, that my life took a dramatic turn. A near-death experience during a pilgrimage thrust me into an exploration of faith that I had never anticipated. I remember falling into darkness, my body no longer responding, and it was in that stillness that I encountered Jesus, a radiant figure illuminating the void around me. In the presence of Jesus, my understanding of religion cracked wide open. He spoke to me about the truths I had overlooked, revealing the hidden agendas that were woven into the fabric of our beliefs. The revelation was staggering. I understood in that moment that my community, though filled with good intentions, was part of a larger deception perpetuated by the elite, those who manipulated our fears to control us. I saw the spiritual war one had felt in my heart manifesting not only within me but throughout the world. There was a struggle for the soul of humanity, and I had a role to play in the awakening of others caught in the same web of lies. As I returned to consciousness, the weight of these revelations settled on my shoulders, a mantle I could no longer ignore. I felt compelled to share this truth, to illuminate the path for others still trapped by fear and rigid doctrine. Yet, I was acutely aware that such a mission came with immense risks. In a community where questioning faith was synonymous with betrayal, I faced the prospect of isolation, of being branded a heretic. But the urgency of the truth I had encountered ignited a fire in my heart, propelling me toward my newfound purpose. I had to stand firm against the tides of deception, even if it meant swimming against the current of my past. The road ahead was fraught with challenges, but I was determined to navigate this spiritual landscape, driven by the hope that my awakening could inspire others to step into the light. As a 35-year-old teacher of the Quran, I've been seen as a pillar of respect and authority within my community. Yet beneath that facade lies a profound emotional emptiness that has haunted me for years. I wake up every day with the weight of family expectations pressing down on my shoulders, the need to embody the very principles I teach. People look up to me, yet inside, I'm caught in a struggle that feels increasingly isolated. Each prayer I lead, every lesson I impart, feels like a performance rather than a genuine connection with my faith. I know the words, I know the rituals, but where is the spirit? Where is the fulfillment? It wasn't always like this. I remember a time when my faith ignited a fire within me, providing guidance and a sense of purpose. But as the years rolled on, that flame dimmed into a flicker. The traditions that once provided comfort began to feel like chains binding my spirit. I started to question everything: my beliefs, the teachings I had been so devoted to, and the very fabric of the community I called home. It was as if a storm was gathering inside me, a spiritual war brewing quietly, waiting for the right moment to erupt. Then it happened. One fateful evening, while returning home from a long day, I was involved in a serious accident. Everything went black. Suddenly, I found myself in a vast, dark expanse, weightless and suspended in a realm that felt both foreign and familiar. It was there that I encountered Jesus. His presence was radiant, a warm light in the coldness of my surroundings. He approached me with kindness, his gaze piercing through my doubts and fears. In that instant, I felt both vulnerable and utterly safe, as if I was finally seen for who I truly was. Jesus spoke to me of truths that challenged everything I had ever known. He revealed the hidden agendas of those in power, the elite who manipulate faith to control the minds and hearts of the masses. I saw visions of a world caught in the throes of a spiritual war, people blindly following doctrines that fed division and fear. The sights of suffering and oppression played out before me. Wars justified under the guise of religion. Communities torn apart by conflict born of misunderstanding. The revelation was staggering. I understood that the deceptive narrative I had followed for so long was not the ultimate truth, but rather a tool used to bind us, to suppress our spirits. As I emerged from that experience, thrust back into my reality, every doubt I had harbored felt magnified. The walls of tradition loomed large, and I suddenly had to contend with the choice of either continuing down a path of conformity or facing the backlash of revelation. My heart raced as I processed the immense burden of truth that now governed my existence. The world I had known was suddenly transformed, and I felt a compulsion to share my experience, to awaken others who might be entrenched in similar systems of deception. Each step I took away from my past felt like an act of war against the spiritual confines that threatened to suffocate me. I could no longer remain silent, for my awakening demanded action, and the urgency of my mission beat like a drum in my heart. The journey ahead promised to be fraught with challenges, but I was ready to confront whatever lay before me. As I stood in prayer, surrounded by the sacred atmosphere of our mosque, a growing sense of incongruity settled deep within me. The chants of devotion echoed around me, and yet I felt an unsettling disconnection from the words I was reciting. The familiar verses, once filled with certainty and guidance, began to feel like a script I was forced to perform. This inner turmoil became a haunting refrain, a discord between my perceived faith and the reality I was beginning to doubt. I wanted to voice my questions, to expose the cracks in the foundation of beliefs that governed my life, but fear held my tongue captive. Each prayer session, I tried to drown out the nagging sensations that told me something was awry. My dreams became increasingly unsettling, vivid snippets of a different reality where people were bound by more than faith, where religion morphed into a tool of societal control. In one particularly vivid dream, I stood among a crowd, their faces obscured, as a shadowy figure dictated our every action. I woke in a cold sweat, the implications of the dream sinking in like a stone in my stomach. Was my religious devotion a disguise for something darker? The thought lingered, refusing to let go, leaving me in a fog of confusion and anxiety. In my quest for clarity, I began seeking answers in the quiet corners of my mind. I turned to literature often considered controversial, books and articles from those who had ventured away from our shared beliefs. I immersed myself in their testimonies, my heart racing with anticipation and fear as I discovered others who had walked away from similar chains. Each account was a window into a world filled with a kind of liberation I had only begun to glimpse, echoing the deep resonance of truth I had felt during those dreams. People spoke of their own struggles against the hidden agenda that had dictated their lives, revealing a spiritual war that many were still blissfully unaware of. As my studies progressed, I encountered a powerful moment of revelation that changed everything. One evening, while grappling with the weight of these realizations, I found myself drawn into a deep, meditative state. It was there that I felt the presence of Jesus enveloping me, the warmth radiating peace and understanding. He spoke softly, filling the void with love and acceptance. "Ahmad," he said, "the truth lies not in conforming, but in understanding that faith should set you free, not bind you to fear." His words echoed through me, piercing through the layers of doubt and awakening something long dormant. In that moment, everything I'd been struggling with became clear. It was essential to confront the spiritual war head-on, to challenge the narratives that silenced our voices. As I returned to my everyday life, the urgency to act surged within me. I felt compelled to share what I had learned, to be a beacon for others still entangled in their own denials. Yet, each time I envisioned sharing this truth, the specter of familial rejection loomed large. How could I confront my community, maintain my role as a guide, while advocating for the liberation I had found? The tension was palpable, a tug of war between duty and authenticity. With every passing day, the weight of my mission pressed down on me, the unwavering call of truth urging me forward, even as fear threatened to halt my progress. I understood the stakes. This was not merely about my awakening, but about opening the eyes of others, to inspire a mass movement toward liberation that would transcend the confines of our hidden agendas. It was during a seemingly ordinary preaching session that everything changed. As I stood before my congregation, sharing the wisdom I had dedicated my life to imparting, I suddenly felt a wave of dizziness wash over me. The words I was speaking faded into the background as darkness enveloped my vision. I don't remember hitting the floor, but I do recall the profound stillness that followed. It was as if I had slipped into another realm entirely, one that stripped away the confines of my physical existence. When my awareness returned, I found myself in a vast, dark desert. The air was thick and heavy, amplifying the sense of isolation that crept over me. Looking around, I noticed how desolate the landscape was, devoid of landmarks or signs of life. It felt surreal, as if I was caught between worlds, the tangible life I had always known, and this haunting expanse filled with unanswered questions. Then, from the horizon, a light began to emerge, drawing me closer with an irresistible force. As the radiance approached, I realized it was a figure, the embodiment of love and warmth. Jesus stood before me, his presence illuminating the darkness. He called me by name, and in that moment, everything changed. A profound sense of familiarity enveloped me, as if I had known him my entire life. He spoke with a clarity that pierced through the fog of my fears and doubts. "Ahmad," he said gently, "you are trapped in a spiritual war, blinded by deception that clouds your connection to the truth." In that instant, I understood that this encounter was not just a personal experience. It was an awakening, a journey to unveil the hidden truths behind the religious and cultural frameworks that had dictated my life. Jesus revealed to me the manipulation at play, the elite who crafted these narratives to control the masses. I saw visions of society's struggles, conflicts arising from division and fear, war being waged in the name of ideologies rather than the true essence of humanity. I felt a deep sorrow for those still caught in the web of deception, unaware that their faith had been weaponized. This was a powerful revelation. The chains that had held me captive began to dissolve as the reality of my life's purpose unfurled before me. I could no longer remain silent, while others traversed the same path of confusion I had once walked. As the light of that revelation intensified, I felt an overwhelming sense of responsibility flood my being. Jesus urged me to embrace my awakening fully, to challenge the oppressive norms that stifled genuine spiritual connection. He implored me to share these truths, both for my own liberation and for those too afraid to breathe freely within their own beliefs. The urgency of his message resonated in my heart, propelling me toward a mission that was no longer just about myself, but about unveiling the truth to those yearning for freedom. In the midst of this clarity, I began to awaken to the gravity of my circumstances. I realized that the road ahead would not be easy. Facing rejection from those I had once called family seemed imminent. I could already feel the repercussions of my transformation pressing down on me, but I knew I had transcended the confines of fear. I was no longer just a Amir, the Imam. I was a voice for the silenced, a warrior in the spiritual war that had just begun. My journey was only starting, and every step I took further into this newfound truth was both exhilarating and terrifying. I prepared to rise against the tides of deception, fully aware of the battles that lay ahead. Upon awakening from my life-altering encounter with Jesus, I found myself grappling with the fury of my family and community. The moment I shared my testimony, declaring my newfound faith, was met not with understanding, but with anger and disbelief. They labeled me a heretic, a traitor to everything I had once held sacred. The disappointment in their eyes felt like daggers, and my heart sank under the weight of their words. I could hardly comprehend the depth of their rejection. I had expected some pushback, but the intensity of their fury felt utterly terrifying. I'd walked away from the only life I had ever known, and now it felt as if I were standing on an island, isolated by the very people I loved. Consumed by guilt and fear, I wandered through days of profound loneliness. My mind was a battlefield. The echoes of tradition clamored for my attention, while the truth I had embraced pulled me in a different direction. The spiritual war within me unfolded like a chaotic storm. I longed to explore these teachings of Jesus further, the messages of love, acceptance, and profound wisdom that had illuminated my darkness. Yet each time I felt that urge, I was reminded of the high cost of my awakening, the rejection from those who had once held me in their warm embrace. The isolation weighed heavily on my soul, leaving me questioning whether pursuing this new path was worth the pain I simultaneously endured. During this tumultuous phase, I often found solace in the raw honesty of how I felt. I sought out places, both physical and virtual, where I could express my doubts and fears without judgment. The underground communities of fellow seekers were a lifeline, filled with individuals who understood the struggles of breaking away from oppressive belief systems. Listening to their stories, I realized that I wasn't alone in this conflict. Many had faced similar challenges, wrestling with their identities while actively trying to dismantle the chains that bound them to traditions that stifled their spiritual growth. It was a comforting reminder that the awakening I experienced was a path many were destined to travel, pushing back against the hidden agenda of those who sought to keep us in the dark. As I navigated through these conversations, the deeper truths emerged. The truth about how faith had often been weaponized, twisted to maintain control over minds and hearts. I recalled the visions I had seen during my near-death experience, glimpses of a world caught in division and strife, with powerful entities manipulating circumstances to drive a wedge between us. Those realizations fueled my desire to expose the deception that had permeated our lives for far too long. I began to see my mission more clearly, to share the revelation I had received, to raise awareness about the spiritual war that existed not only within me, but within the fabric of our societies. With this newfound clarity, my resolve strengthened. I started organizing small gatherings in hidden corners, places where people could come together to share their experiences without the weight of societal judgment. The energy in those rooms felt electric, a mixture of fear, hope, and determination. We exchanged ideas and stories, delving into the core of what it meant to awaken spiritually in a world determined to keep us compliant. As we bonded over our shared mission, the urgency to challenge the norms became palpable. Each voice added a layer to our collective strength, urging one another to rise against the forces of deception, even if the path forward was fraught with uncertainty and potential rejection. Secretly, I began my search for truth, delving into the pages of the Bible with a mixture of anticipation and fear. Each night, after my family had settled into their routines, I would retreat to my room, pulling the thin volume close to my chest as if it contained the very secrets of the universe. With every verse I read, I felt a surge of warmth coursing through me, a stark contrast to the cold doubt that had seeped into my heart during my years as an imam. Jesus' teachings resonated with a clarity that was often missing in the rigid structure of my upbringing. I was awakening to something profound, something that felt both liberating and terrifying. As I navigated through these newly discovered beliefs, I stumbled across testimonies from ex-Muslims, people who had walked a path similar to mine. Their stories lit a fire within me. Each narrative was a thread that connected us in this shared quest for authenticity. Hearing their experiences helped me articulate my own confusion, echoing the thoughts I had quietly wrestled with for years. I felt a strange sense of belonging in their words, a comforting realization that there were others who had also uncovered the hidden agenda behind the faith we were taught to blindly accept. Amidst this solitary exploration, real connections started to form. I managed to connect with a support group of Christians, individuals who had experienced their own awakenings and who welcomed me without judgment. Each meeting became a refuge, a space where I could express my fears about leaving my culture and the anxiety about how my actions would be viewed by my family and community. In their presence, I found encouragement as they shared their battles against societal expectations and the spiritual wars they had faced. They nurtured my quest for the truth, helping me understand that embracing my faith did not require me to abandon my cultural identity. Yet, as I immersed myself deeper into this new community, I constantly wrestled with a torrent of emotions. The fear of rejection from my family was a looming shadow, casting doubt on my every step forward. How could I reconcile the love I held for my family with the truths I was now discovering? I often found myself lying awake at night, grappling with the weight of my choices. I understood that my journey toward spiritual awakening might lead to a breach I wasn't sure I could mend. The oppressive grip of religion that I had felt for so long was shifting, and I felt the tension build between who I was and who I was becoming. As I reflected on these challenges, I came to see that the spiritual war was not merely external. It began within my own heart and mind. The revelations I uncovered about the elite manipulating societal beliefs and the cycles of deception echoed in the world outside. I became acutely aware that many people around me were still trapped in an illusion, serving the very systems that oppressed them. My journey felt like more than a personal awakening. It was a calling to rise against the very structures that sought to keep us in the dark. The fire within me burned brighter with the realization that the truth I sought was not just for myself, but for everyone still lost in the shadows. I felt an urgent need to confront the fear that threatened to silence my voice, knowing that the only way to break the cycle of deception was to boldly embrace and share the truth I had found. As I began to process the profound nature of my supernatural experience, something shifted within me. I realized that this wasn't just a coincidence, it was a divine calling. In the wake of my encounter with Jesus, the revelation of deeper truths surged through me like a tidal wave, compelling me to share my journey with others. It became clear that I was meant to awaken those trapped under the weight of deception, those who, like me, had been enchanted by the hidden agenda of the elite. This mission, however, was not without its dangers. I was acutely aware of the risks I might face in both my personal safety and my well-being as I began to unravel the very threads that had once defined my life. Every day since my awakening felt like stepping into the shadows of a spiritual war. The truths I had uncovered illuminated not only my path but also warned of the implications for those still ensnared in their respective beliefs. I began to share my story with others in small, intimate gatherings, creating a space for open dialogue where everyone could speak their truth without fear. As I spoke, I saw the flicker of recognition in their eyes, the understanding that we were all battling the same deceptions that had kept us in silence for so long. The urgency behind my message increased. This was not merely about me, it was about laying the groundwork for collective awakening. Yet with every new connection came a shadow of fear. I could not ignore the potential repercussions of my truth-sharing. The fear of backlash was constant, lurking in the recesses of my mind. What if my family rejected me? What if the community I had dedicated my life to turned against me? Those questions haunted me as I stood on the precipice of my new reality. But the fire ignited by my revelation pushed back against that fear. I understood that true liberation sometimes requires stepping into the unknown, challenging the status quo, and risking everything for the sake of truth. My encounters with other seekers fueled this resolve. We gathered to share stories of our awakening, each testimony a powerful testament to the spiritual war we were engaged in. Hearing about others' struggles with the manipulation of faith reinforced my own journey. I began to see the larger picture. The wars being fought in our hearts and minds mirrored the physical conflicts erupting across the globe. The same hidden forces orchestrating division and strife within our communities were the same entities that thrived on chaos and oppression on a larger scale. The reality of this interconnectedness deepened my commitment to challenge the spiritual deception that plagued us all. As I continued to navigate this transformative path, I felt both empowered and vulnerable. The responsibility of sharing the truth felt heavy, but necessary. In the face of potential danger, I found strength in the belief that I was not alone. The spirits of countless others searching for truth stood behind me, echoing the call for justice and awakening. The deeper I delved, the more apparent it became that my mission was not just about illuminating my own path. It was about igniting a flame that could inspire a generation to break free from the chains of deception and awaken to the reality we were meant to embrace. With each step, I solidified my commitment to this truth, preparing to face the future, despite the risks, for the sake of a world waiting to awaken. In a powerful symbolic gesture, I made the decision to leave my home and everything familiar behind, seeking a new city where I could freely practice my faith without fear or scrutiny. The weight of my past lingered heavily in my heart, yet the promise of liberation called to me like a beacon in the night. I had come to understand that the spiritual war one was engaged in was about more than just my personal beliefs. It was about carving out a space for authenticity in a world filled with deception. This journey would mark the beginning of a new chapter, one that promised the potential for profound change, not only in my life, but in the lives of others searching for the truth. The moment I arrived in the new city, a sense of freedom enveloped me. I felt as though I could finally breathe without the suffocating weight of expectations hanging over me. Each day held the promise of exploration and discovery, yet I still carried the remnants of doubt. It was during this transitional phase that the urge to embrace a new beginning solidified within me. I knew I had to take the next step, to make a commitment to my newfound faith by accepting baptism, a bold act that symbolized my full acceptance of Jesus and the teachings I had begun to embrace. The choice wasn't taken lightly. It was a profound act of liberation from both my past and the hidden agendas that sought to bind me. As I prepared for the baptism, a swirl of emotions engulfed me: excitement, fear, and a longing for connection. This was not just a personal decision. It was also a commitment to serve others who felt lost in the same spiritual war one had faced. I imagined the moment of my baptism, surrounded by other believers who uplifted each other's spirits in this new community. This act was a declaration that I would not stand idly by while others suffered in silence, denied the truth due to the manipulation of those in power. The urgency to share this revelation became a part of who I was, driving me to advocate for those still caught in the web of deception. In that life-altering moment, when the water enveloped me, I felt an overwhelming sense of peace. It was as if all the doubt, fear, and guilt that had plagued me evaporated, replaced by an unshakable certainty of purpose. In the depths of my heart, I knew that my journey was no accident. It was divinely orchestrated to lead me towards a mission of awakening. Jesus had extended an invitation to me, one I could no longer refuse. I had chosen to break free from the chains that had bound my soul, and I was determined to help others find their own path to liberation. As I stepped out of the water, I felt renewed, a sense of freedom pulsating through my veins. I could no longer remain silent about the truths I had uncovered, truths about the spiritual war that threatened to silence the voices of so many. I looked around at my new community, inspired and eager to share my experiences, to ignite conversations that tackled the difficult questions many dared not speak aloud. This was just the beginning of my commitment to a lifetime of evangelism and service, a journey molded by love and fueled by the awakening of the truth that I had come to witness. The future lay ahead, vast and uncertain, yet filled with the promise of healing and transformation for those still searching for their own truth. Years after my awakening, I found a new life in a supportive community that embraced me without judgment. In this haven, I thrived, dedicating myself fully to the mission I felt called to embark upon since that fateful day in Mecca. My past was a haunting memory, but it no longer defined me. Surrounded by individuals who shared similar journeys, I found strength in our collective experiences. Together, we formed a bond, united by our understanding of the spiritual war that raged not only within us, but within the world at large. The transformations I had witnessed fueled my resolve, pushing me to impact the lives of many and help guide them toward their own truths. I could feel the urgency of our mission in every discussion, in every action we took. We shared not just our stories of awakening, but also insight into the hidden agendas we had all been exposed to. The elite continued to thrive on the manipulation of beliefs, breaking communities and stirring division. I often recalled the vision I had during my near-death experience, how Jesus had revealed the layers of deception that had clouded our understanding. With every testimony I shared, I saw flickers of recognition light up faces around me. Individuals who had grappled with the same fears, doubts, and confusion. It was both humbling and empowering to be a part of this community, knowing that each of us was bravely stepping into the light, challenging the status quo. Despite the peace I had found, I still held on to a glimmer of hope for reconciliation with my family. The thought of revisiting the love and connection we once shared often filled me with both yearning and dread. I imagined my parents' faces, the love they had for me wrestling with the disappointment they felt in the wake of my departure from the faith they held dear. How would I bridge that gap? How could I convey that my journey into faith had not been a rejection of our past, but an embrace of something deeper? This internal conflict added layers of complexity to my mission, each day reminding me of the sacrifice I had made and the struggle I still faced. As I spoke with others in the community, I sensed the weight of our shared mission. This spiritual war demanded resilience and courage, as we squared against the forces of deception that sought to keep humanity complacent. Together, we explored the implications of our newfound freedom, recognizing that awakening came with the responsibility to advocate for others who remained trapped. Our conversations delved into the societal constructs that kept people divided, fueling the urgency to share what we had learned. We became warriors, not just in our own right, but for those who had yet to confront their own chains. The fire to spread the truth burned fiercely within me. I had become an evangelist of sorts, sharing not only my story but the profound revelations Jesus had imparted. Now armed with greater understanding, I could confront the obstacles that lay ahead, ready to face the backlash of those who still adhered faithfully to the doctrine I had left behind. I felt the rush of purpose that came from this mission, a call to rise, to speak out against the manipulation and control that permeated our world. Together, we sought to dismantle the deception with every brave exchange, every shared experience, and in doing so, we reminded each other that awakening was not just a personal journey. It was a collective movement toward a brighter, more truthful future. The moment I embraced the truth that transcended my previous understanding, I felt a profound shift within me. It was as if the very essence of my being had been awakened, and the revelation that true faith goes beyond rigid religious traditions became clear. I had spent years tethered to doctrines that, while meant to guide, ultimately confined my spirit and stifled my connection to the divine. But in that instant, I realized that the call of Jesus was not just an invitation to adopt a new belief. It was a summons toward liberation and transformation. My spiritual awakening was catalyzed by a near-death experience that challenged everything I thought I knew. Surrounded by darkness, my life seemed to hang in the balance, and it was in that moment of vulnerability that I encountered Jesus. His presence enveloped me in a light so radiant that it pierced through the deception I had accepted for so long. He began to unveil layers of hidden truths about the manipulation of faith, and how the elite utilized religion as a tool to maintain control over the masses. The unveiling of these truths was staggering, and I felt a surge of empowerment. The chains of confusion began to fall away. As I transitioned back to consciousness, I understood that my newfound insight came with immense responsibility. It was not enough for me to hold on to these revelations for myself. I was compelled to share them with others still trapped in the confines of their beliefs. However, the fear of backlash lingered in the air like a heavy fog. I feared I would lose the approval of my family, my community, and the very foundation of my identity. Yet my encounters with Jesus had shifted something fundamental within me. I could no longer tolerate the hidden agendas and the spiritual war being fought in silence. In the weeks that followed, I began to seek out others who shared my longing for authenticity. I started holding informal gatherings, creating a space for open dialogue where we could explore our thoughts without fear of judgment. These meetings took on a life of their own, filled with the passionate voices of fellow seekers sharing their experiences. Together, we confronted the painful realities of our situations, the wars fought in the name of faith, the divisions sown among us, and the technology wielded by the elite to control our narrative. Each conversation became an act of rebellion against the deception we'd endured, a collective awakening that breathed new life into our weary souls. Yet, as I endeavored to spread this message of truth and freedom, I carried the burden of responsibility heavily on my shoulders. I felt both a sense of liberation and the weight of my commitment to those still in bondage to their beliefs. The urgency of our mission was profound. Each day felt like a new opportunity to awaken another spirit to the truth that had set me free. Just as I had found solace in the stories of others, I hoped to be a source of inspiration for those yearning for something more than what was laid before them by tradition. The journey of self-discovery had brought me to this juncture, and I was determined to honor that path, even as the stakes grew higher and the threats intensified. I knew the battle was not just for my own soul, but for the souls of those who felt misled and manipulated. Each step forward felt like a dance between hope and fear, but the light of truth burned ever brighter within me. I was a soldier in the spiritual war, ready to confront any challenge that lay ahead. After all, this wasn't merely about believing in Jesus. It was about embracing a new understanding of what it meant to be truly free, and urging others to join me in this awakening, to break free from the chains of deception and step bravely into the light of their true selves. As I stand here today, I can't help but reflect on my journey, the battle for my soul fought in the shadows of tradition, and the light I came to embrace. Dismissed as an outcast and branded a heretic, I discovered that the very struggle I faced was but a mirror of a larger spiritual war. Today I carry this message of awakening like a torch, one that illuminates not just my path but seeks to guide others as well. I know intimately that the chains of deception can bind us tightly, but I also know that there's a greater purpose coursing through the world, a divine current we are all connected to, compelling us toward truth and freedom. But I must ask you, what about your story? Have you ever felt the echoes of a truth that stirred something deep within? A yearning for clarity amid confusion? For you too may find that the call to awaken is present, waiting to break through the veils that shroud the world in fear. Please, share your experiences in the comments. Your voice matters. Together, when we speak our truth, we dismantle the very structures that seek to silence us and awaken those still caught in the shadows. If my testimony has sparked something within you, a flicker of recognition, an urge to explore, don't let this moment pass. Subscribe to Truth from Beyond and hit that notification bell. Join us as we continue this exploration of spiritual awakening. For what lies ahead is a deeper unveiling, a journey into the profound mysteries that connect us all. Our mission isn't merely personal. It's a collective awakening that requires every one of us to step into the light. In our next video, I will share a heart-wrenching testimony from another lost soul who found their way through the dark, someone whose experience resonates with the universal quest for truth. Trust me, you won't want to miss it. Together, we can foster a deeper understanding of these hidden truths that resonate through our very being. I'm Ahmad, and I thank you for journeying with me today. Remember, the truth isn't just out there. It's waiting, patiently, for those ready to embrace it. Each one of us has a part to play in this grand tapestry of life. So as you leave today, I urge you to carry your light into the world. Together, we can illuminate even the darkest corners.